everyone, it's Samantha from the Dancing Soap Dish. I hope you're well. A little while ago I made some pretty cool bluey soaps, if I do say so myself, from a Play-Doh set. And the video that I made was a little different from my usual tutorials. It wasn't a tutorial per se, but more a montage showing the process of me making the soap. Because I just love bluey so much, and it was just a special little project that I wanted to do. But I want to now do a video that talks a little bit more about the techniques that I used to make my bluey soap, and also about just little helpful hints for when you take on an epic project like the bluey soaps. So there was quite a large project. There were 8 bars of soaps. It took me much longer than a usual project and involved matching special colors and stuff like that. But I've been thinking about it, and I realized that every now and then an epic project comes along. It might be for a close friend's wedding, or for a baby shower, or something you just sort of have on your heart that you really want to do. And I just wanted to share with you today my tweak of the week, which is using a Play-Doh set as a soap mold, but also just some extra helpful hints and tips for those epic soap projects, just to make them a little bit easier and help you approach them being a little bit more organized. So here we go. So my first tip today for epic soap projects is about mixing custom colors. So if you're doing a project where you need to match the color for any reason, so for example, when I was making my bluey soap, Bluey and Bingo, the puppies, are very specific colors. And if I didn't do them the same colors that they were on the TV show, then they wouldn't really look like Bluey and Bingo. So I had to make sure I got the right blues and the right browns. Now, mixing colors to get the right color using melt and pour soap can be tricky, because melt and pour soap sets up really fast. It hardens really quickly. So while you're sitting there trying to get your color right, your soap can go hard again, and you can just make a real mess. So what I like to do is I actually like to pre-mix my colorants. So I set out with my liquid soap colorings here, and I actually mixed up the colors that I wanted with the soap colorings first, just in little bowls. And when I had a brown that I thought looked about right and a blue that looked about right, I could add it to my liquid soap base and mix it up really quickly without any worries that it was going to set before I had those soap colors done. Now in this case I used liquid soap coloring, but you can do the same for micas. If you prefer to use micas, you can pre-mix your micas in a separate container. Check out my mica mixing video. I'll put a link in the description of this video, and you can mix colors separately before you add them to the soap. Another tip for getting the right custom colors is to use a combination of clear and white soap bases. So in this case here, I'm adding my colorants sometimes to a clear base, sometimes to a white base, sometimes to a combination of the two. And yes, I know you can just use a clear base and add as much titanium dioxide as you want. But when time is a factor, it's just a shortcut basically to use the 2 different types of base. I mean, these soap bases are identical except for the fact that one has titanium dioxide pre-added to make a white soap base. They're exactly the same other than that. And this way I was able to also get sort of 3 different shades of the same blue and 3 different shades of the same brown. And all I really did was use a full white base, a full clear base, and a half and half. And it would be really easy to replicate, really easy to measure out. And it's just a huge time saver. So that's another thing, a little tip that I recommend you do. My next tip for epic soap projects is about keeping colors consistent across multiple batches. So I only had 1 bluey mold and 1 bingo mold, but I needed to make 4 of each of the characters. And I wanted them to be exactly the same color every single time. So what I did is I made base bars of all the colors that I needed to use to make Bluey and Bingo, and then I chopped them up again and just stored them in paper cups just for ease of use, so that every time I wanted to make a new Bluey or a new Bingo, I knew they were going to be all the same color every single time. Yes, it's okay to remelt the soap once it has been colored. You don't want to remelt it too many times. I mean, the second time I did it, I took just exactly what I needed and sort of discarded if there was anything left over, I discarded it. But your soap should definitely be fine if you just reheat it just that once. So making colored base bars is a quick and easy way to make sure you keep your colors consistent across different batches. Moving on, I have a tip for using unconventional soap molds, and this is where my tweak of the week comes in, because I used Play-Doh molds from a Play-Doh set to make these soaps. Here they are laid out here. You're just supposed to roll your Play-Doh flat and press it into the mold, and then it'll easily pop out. No big deal. But these are made of plastic. They're quite flat, but they are a bit flexible. They're a little bit bendy. And what I did is I just added the colored soaps. I overfilled the areas for those colors, and then I used a bamboo skewer just to scrape back. Because the mold has those little lines in it, I was able to just scrape back to where those colors were, just to clean that up, and then I could pour my second color. This was not easy, I will be honest. I had plenty of failures, and even in the end, you'll see I was never able to get a bluey or a bingo out of the mold without any part of them breaking. But that was okay because it's actually such a large mold. It was too big for a bar of soap, so I had to cut it down anyway. So what I did was I'd normally try and take it out of the mold around the feet or the belly area, which did get completely mangled, but then that part was chopped off. And the good half above it was used for the soap bar. So yeah, basically I did this because I've had this Play-Doh set for a while, and every time I look at it, I just go, what would it be like to try and make soap from that? So one day I did. And yeah, like I said, it wasn't easy. But I'm very glad I did it because I think the results are just amazing. And I really, really love my Bluey and Bingo soap. So my tips for this is actually to, I don't know if you can tell from the video, but spray your mold with alcohol first. And I do that every time I'm pouring a new section straight onto the mold. This is because it's sort of, it's just a way to break the tension. I mean, alcohol evaporates readily when it's exposed to the air. But if you put it on the mold and then put a layer of the soap over the alcohol, it stops the air from getting to it, and the alcohol actually doesn't evaporate. It still sort of stays liquid. And then that layer of liquid that you have there between the plastic mold and the soap can benefit you when you're trying to separate that soap from the mold, because soap tends to stick to plastic really, really well. It's not easy to get out. Another thing I recommend is that you overfill your mold. You'll see at the end when these are filled, I fill them until they overflow onto the piece of baking paper that I've got there. It's just, again, easier to get them out if they're really chock full. The skewer that I'm using now, just to tidy them up after I've poured each individual color, I also use that skewer at the end to sort of, I force it down in between the side of the mold and the soap, and sort of use it as a lever to sort of leverage the soap out of the mold. So I definitely recommend having a skewer on hand. And look, at the end of the day, if you're really, really having trouble with this, the fact that I'm using so many colors does compromise the strength of the embed. So if I was to pour just one single color into this mold, it's much easier to pop that out in one piece than it is with all these individual colors that I've used here. Everywhere that a color joins another color is actually a point of weakness, and that's where you'll see at the end most of my molds fell apart, was the feet and the hands and the ears, so if you want to do something like this and you're really having trouble, just pour a single color and maybe you can paint the embed afterwards, or even just make a pink bluey or a green bingo and just do like on a colored background, just create some fun colored psychedelic character soaps or something like that. Get in touch with your inner Andy Warhol and create some Andy Warhol inspired Bluey and Bingo soaps. I think they'd look pretty cool. Okay, so I've finished pouring my Bluey and I'm just putting the finishing touches on Bingo here so I can pour the final color. I do like to scrape away the soap from the edges just so that the next layer of soap has a chance to adhere to the edges too. So that's what I'm doing here. Just making myself a little bit of room, because yeah, there's these very thin embeds, but they have quite a few layers to them, which is really interesting. Okay, so I'm just gonna pour this final Bingo. You saw me spray the alcohol there. There we go. I've overfilled the Bingo mold just like I recommended. These are set now. If you see me there using the skewer to separate the soap, and then I'll just put my finger underneath and I'm very gently, this is in fast forward, but at the time I was doing it very slowly, easing that away. I've lost both of Bluey's hands here. I'm having to pop those out separately, but that's okay because I don't need them for the soap anyway. And here I am using the skewer again just to sort of ease up the edges of the soap. I've lost the feet, so I go back and ease around the tummy and just very carefully pull that away. And there we go. The same for all the little accessories. I poured them into the little accessory mold here. Just making sure these ones I sort of mixed the colors as I went because they were a little bit easier colors to do. Unfortunately, I don't have any footage about removing these from the mold, but I did it the same way, and I did end up I broke them because I had to insert the skewer somewhere. If you have a look at these little glasses, they did have a break in them, but I just made sure that the break was in the part that was going to sit over Bluey's nose that I was going to end up cutting away anyway. And also the eyes, I just made them separately again from the mold. I just poured some black and some white to make the eyes, and then I just cut them out. So that's an easy way to do your accessories. Here you can see there's the magic xylophone. If you have a really good look close up, you can see that there is a line across the edge of that from where I inserted the skewer. But I just went with it. It was okay. The same with the crown. I just did it up one of the sides, on the right hand side there. You can't even barely tell, but it's just a little bit pushed in. That's where I inserted the skewer to pop it out of the mold. But I'm just painting these up now, and it's barely noticeable. Once you've painted them up and they're finished and they're in the soap, you can't even see those little lines or the little sort of, parts that are a little bit mangled because of how I had to try and get them out of the mold. The molds that I used are not silicone, so this stuff did not pop out easily as it does from silicone. It was plastic mold, so I just had to force my skewer in there somewhere, and then once I did that and broke the surface tension, it did sort of pop out quite easily. So there you go. That's one thing that you got to do. So yeah, here we go. Here we have, I've used this Bluey that lost her hand, sorry. Just here. I don't need a hand. Also the goggles are broken on the very edge. If you have a look on the corner, I had to break them to get them out of the mold, but I was able to, if you choose to do that in a spot where you're going to discard that part later, then you have no worries. No one's ever going to know that you had to break that to get it out of the mold. So if you're sitting there going, oh my goodness, how did she do that? How did she get that soap out of a plastic mold without breaking it? The answer is I didn't. I had to break it. It had to be broken. But if you use your smarts and break it in a place where you won't need it later, you don't have a problem. For those of you who've been melt and pour soap making for a little while, you know that alcohol plays a critical role in any epic melt and pour soap project. And the same was true for my Bluey and Bingo soap bars. But it might interest you to know that in this project, I actually used ethyl alcohol instead of isopropyl alcohol, which is the common choice. I stumbled across this article on the Wholesale Supplies Plus website. I will put a link in the description of this video so you can read it for yourself. And it was very interesting. It was talking about the use of alcohol in melt and pour soap making. It starts off discussing why alcohol pops the bubbles on the surface of your soap. So it says when soap or detergent is added to water, they don't actually dissolve, they form an emulsion and you get bubbles. But in contrast, soaps and detergents actually dissolve in ethanol and isopropanol, which are both alcohols. And so what happens is when you spritz alcohol onto bubbles at the surface of melt and pour soap, the soap dissolves in the alcohol. The ordered film of soap molecules breaks up into individual molecules and the bubbles disappear. So I thought that was a really great explanation, but another interesting thing about this article is it goes on to discuss an experiment that the writer did with alcohols and adhering layers together. Now I know layers of melt and pour soap splitting apart is a problem for a lot of you, and a lot of people swear by isopropyl alcohol for making layers stick together. So the writer of this article designed an experiment where he tested basically the adhesive qualities of alcohol. He compared it to nothing, so that was his control. He also compared it to using water, spraying water between layers, spraying ethanol between layers, and spraying isopropanol between layers, because he wanted to see which was the best solution. So the article describes his experiment. Go ahead and read it. But what I thought was so amazing was the results. I've highlighted them here and I'm going to read them out. The untreated bar broke cleanly at the joint. That's expected. The bar treated with water did not break. It just bent. The bar treated with ethanol broke, but with some difficulty. And the bar treated with isopropanol broke cleanly. I was flabbergasted, because this experiment basically says that isopropanol doesn't really hold layers together all that well. And if you are going to use an alcohol, you might be better off using ethanol. So I set to test this out. I was using, when I first started this project, I was using my isopropyl alcohol, and I really was having trouble with my my embeds sort of coming apart. As I was trying to remove them from the molds, they were coming apart quite easily at the layers, at the different colored weak spots basically. But when I switched to ethanol, which I had to use a denatured alcohol or methylated spirits, as it's called here in Australia, all of a sudden it was holding together much, much better. So I have to say that what I discovered sort of agrees with the results of the experiment from WSP, and I was pretty mind blown by that. And I'm wondering if I might be swapping my isopropyl alcohol for my ethanol on a permanent basis. It was really, really interesting. All right, moving on to my next tip, and it is about positioning embeds, and it is basically this. Stick down your embeds before you pour your final layer. It's just so much easier. It's so much easier. Get yourself a little bit of clear soap base and just pour a tiny bit on top of your base bar and stick those embeds down, especially if you're working with multiple embeds like I am here, and also multiple heights as well. I mean, I have some embeds like the eyebrows, for example, that have to sit on top of other things. Those eyebrows are really tiny. If I just sort of position them in place and then poured a clear layer over the top of them, they're going to move. They're definitely going to move. So it's much better to stick your embeds down first. It gives you peace of mind to know that nothing's going to go floating away while you're pouring your final layer. And also you can make sure that you're happy where everything is positioned, and you know that that's how it's going to look when the soap bar is finished. So stick your embeds down. You'll be so happy that you did. Now, my final tips are for maintaining the clarity of a clear soap base. So that top layer that you do, if it's cloudy, if it's hard to see through, then it doesn't matter how beautiful your embeds are, because you won't be able to see them. So tips for making sure that ultra clear soap base stays ultra clear. First, I want to discuss what we're looking at here. So I've just melted this clear soap base. I'm checking the temperature now, It is exactly what the manufacturer says it needs to be heated to be fully melted. Okay, but you can see there's a lot of bubbles sort of present in there, and sometimes that's unavoidable. So what I like to do is I like to make sure that those bubbles sort of dissipate a little bit before I start pouring. Now this video's been sped up, so it doesn't look like I waited very long at all, but I did, because as you can see here, there's sort of like little groups of bubbles, sort of like a little bit of a foam appearing on the top of my soap base there. So all those bubbles that are in it are sort of grouping together, coming to the surface, and that's a good thing, because that means I can sort of pull them to the side while they're still in the jug and not have it actually end up in my top layer of soap, because I want that top layer to be super clear. See how I'm using my skewer here to sort of scrape those little bits of foam back? I don't want them to pour into my soap mold. So I'm just checking again the temperature. It's a little bit cooler now, and I'm pouring it on. So another tip I like for really clear soap base is to view the layer of clear from the top. So I've built these soap bars from the bottom up. Sometimes people want the nice soap finish of like the soap mold, and so they build their bars upside down. But you'll find that you then get the texture of your soap mold on your clear base, and sometimes that texture can go a ways to making that transparent layer not so transparent. So you'll find, if you do an experiment yourself, just fill up a mold half the way with some ultra clear soap base. When it's set, take out that piece of soap, have a look at it from the top, then have a look at it from the bottom, and you'll see that if you look at it from the top, it is much clearer than if you look at it from the bottom. So that's why when I normally have a clear layer like this, you're actually looking down on the soap. The very last layer that I pour is the clear layer, and you're looking down onto the clear from the top. Another helpful hint is what I'm doing here, and it's to remove the top skin from your freshly poured clear layer. So like I said, that foam that I was trying to remove while it's in the jug, if some of that foam happens to make it into your layer of soap, it will float to the surface, as will any sort of other bubbles that aren't sort of being popped by your alcohol. And if you take a skewer, once that top layer has just developed a skin, a very thin skin, but once that thin skin has just developed, if you take your skewer and use your skewer to basically pull that top skin off, you'll find that underneath you have this beautiful clear soap with no foam, no bubbles, no anything. And that's what I'm doing here. And you can see that as soon as I pull that skin away, that those soaps are looking so much more clearer. Another tip is try not to scent your clear layers if you can help it. I mean, with the bars like this, it's easy just to scent the base bar. I scented the base bars here, and it's like almost 3/4 of the bar or 2/3 of the bar. It's plenty of scent, don't worry. And then you don't need to scent your clear layer, and so you don't have to worry. Some fragrance oils, some essential oils can make them go cloudy, but it's really hard to know which ones are going to do that. So the safest thing to do is to just not scent your clear soap. Also, sometimes if you don't mix it in properly, it can make it cloudy as well, but because often you're in a rush because you don't want it to set, there's just so many things that could go wrong that the less you do, the better. So don't scent your soap if you can help it. And last but not least is to just not make your layer of clear soap too thick. I mean, the best way to see through it really well is to make sure that it's really only as thick as it needs to be. When I poured these, I basically just poured clear on top of them until every part of the embed is just covered. And, that's enough. If I start pouring it too much on top, the thicker it gets, the more chance you have for the transparency to be affected. So as thin a layer, that top layer as you can, is also a great tip. So I hope you enjoyed this tweak of the week and my tips for epic melt and pour soap projects. Don't forget, if you want to watch the making of these soaps in a little bit more detail, you can check out my other video. I'll put a link in the description that has the full montage set to the beautiful bluey music, which I think is very relaxing and very fun to watch. But I hope you enjoyed my tips. I hope you learned something here today. If you have any questions about what you've learned here today, just pop them in the comments and I'll reply. But in the meantime, guys, thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe if you love what I do. And I'll see you next time. Enjoy.